Hello everyone, and welcome to this recorded session. I'm Chloe, I'm from Art and Energy. We are a group of artists, makers, thinkers and tinkerers, all using our creative skills to journey towards a brighter, greener future. And today I'm joined by Lewis Winks. Hello, Lewis.
Hi, everybody.
Lewis, can you tell everybody who you are and what you do?
Hi, yeah. My name is Lewis Winks, and I am a researcher at the University of Exeter based in the geography department. And my background is environmental education, outdoor learning and sustainability. And I'm very lucky to be working with Chloe and the rest of Art and Energy on this project. And we'll be delving into some of the background to eco-anxiety as part of today's session.
Yeah, so this is a creative research project which we hope you are all going to get involved with. It's called Art and Agency, and it's exploring eco-anxiety and creativity and seeing where those two things meet and what that all means for everyone. So in the very first instance, what we'd really like you to do, please, is to think about what eco-anxiety means to you. And if you have got yourself a definition, then please could you share it on our club, burythegiant.club. It's a space where anyone who wants to be creative in response to the climate emergency can get involved and join in and take their own creative steps towards that brighter, greener future. And we are holding a space online in that forum for us to share our experiences and to help us to develop this research piece. So go ahead, definitions of eco-anxiety, record it on Bury the Giant Club, then come back and listen to what Lewis has to say about the research that he's done to date. So I'm hoping everyone's going to go off and do that now, Lewis, and they're going to come back and it's on to you.
Okay. So I'm just going to share my screen. Oh, you need to enable screen sharing.
Oh yeah, okay. Get the technicalities right. That would be good.
It's okay, you can seamlessly cut this bit out of the recording.
Go, go, go.
Okay. Okay. Okay, Chloe, is it showing right? Yep. Okay, so as Chloe's already said, this is a project about eco-anxiety and creative responses to the climate and ecological emergency, which hopefully by this point needs very little introduction, other than to say that we are in a climate and ecological emergency, and within certainly based down here in Devon, where we're based, there are various responses to that on a variety of scales, all the way from the individual and what the individual could do up to local authorities and local governments and organizations and how they're responding. And so this project is designed to understand more about how individuals are responding creatively to the climate and ecological emergency, and how that creative activity kind of interplays with eco-anxiety. We're going to delve into what eco-anxiety is throughout this presentation, but crucially, this is not necessarily about seeing eco-anxiety as something that's bad, but actually something that can support action on things that we care about on the climate and ecological emergency. And so we'll go into that, and as we go through the presentation, we can learn a bit more about it. But one of the main things that we're going to try and cover is what's known about eco-anxiety at the moment, and how that relates to the way in which it can stress us and cause grief and problems for people's mental health, but also the way in which it can drive action. So this is the menu for this session. We're going to be thinking about what eco-anxiety is and the context in which eco-anxiety is operating, and also a little bit of perhaps some of the shortcomings and the unknowns currently in the research. And as part of that, we'll be thinking about what we know contributes to eco-anxiety, but also what might help with eco-anxiety. And at the end of this presentation, we'll then try to frame this in a way which is more about discussing how eco-anxiety can be a gateway into action, or perhaps can be one of the symptoms of wanting to take action on issues that we care about. So hopefully you've already had a go at thinking about what eco-anxiety means to you, and what eco-anxiety, coming up with a bit of a definition of eco-anxiety. And it's really important, I think, to say right at the beginning that this is currently a very new area of research, and there's also lots of different definitions and ways of defining eco-anxiety, as well as lots of different subcategories within what we might call eco-anxiety, and we'll move into that. But it evades definition in many ways. Well, what we do know is that the WHO has very recently started to try to get to grips with the mental health fallout of climate change, and climate change is creating lots of pressures in different parts of society and different parts of the natural environment. But through a variety of different exposure pathways, people are also subjected to mental health pressures and various outcomes. And so stresses, feelings of helplessness and grief, varieties of behavior outcomes from that as well are fairly alarming. And then within that, there are complicating factors which might heighten our predisposition to feelings of anxiety and other mental health issues as outcomes. So this just gives you a view of how the WHO are viewing this and its relationship to the rest of the climate and ecological emergency. And within the literature, we can see that here is Whitmarsh talking about how, as the severity of climate change increases, we're going to be seeing more and more burdens on society in terms of mental health. And the WHO again have seen that out of almost 100 countries that have been surveyed, only 9 have put in place any kind of support for mental health related to climate impacts. So we really should be quite concerned about this. And after saying that we don't have any definition of what eco-anxiety is, I'm going to give you a definition, only because it can be helpful to think with. But here is my definition, or rather Albrecht's definition from 2011. It's a form of anxiety related to stress or distress caused by environmental changes and our knowledge of them. So obviously the environment's always changing, and this is about the more perhaps near-term, more sort of felt changes which we can see and feel in the environment around us. But if you went back to the year 2000, you may have come across, perhaps in the media or in discussion, eco-anxiety or climate anxiety. But back then, this was very much within the confines of being a consumer sort of mentality, something which was based on what you buy or what you consume. You probably can remember, if you can remember back to year 2000, various kind of guidance on being an ethical consumer, and then the kind of inertia related to kind of which shampoo should I buy, or what's the best car that I should purchase for being most economic, and various things like that. So it's very much about being a consumer, and there were concrete actions for relieving this kind of so-called anxiety. But if we fast forward 23 years to today, we can see that the distress related to the very big and wicked problem of climate change and other ecological problems have no obvious mechanisms for alleviation. And so we can see far beyond being consumers what this might mean in order for us to act as citizens within the world. And that's both for us as individuals and also groups and communities that we're part of as well. And the problem here is it's so diffuse that there are no concrete actions. And it's very tempting to go back to that idea of consumption-based mechanisms for alleviating the problem. And so quite often it's easy for companies, for example, to sell us these kind of beliefs or ways out of our anxiety by saying, if you just could purchase something a bit greener, or if you could just behave slightly differently, then that will alleviate your problems. But it's not really working for everybody, and we can see as feelings of anxiety and distress relating to the environment are increasing. And so this is taken from some of the research that's been done on climate anxiety, and these excerpts are directly from the research, and they just help to give a glimpse of the kind of ways in which eco-anxiety and climate anxiety can manifest within people's lives. And so this could be perhaps an older person worrying about future generations. It might be somebody thinking about their own lives as a young person into the future and feeling that despondency and maybe even lack of control and worry about what the future holds. But that last example as well, I think, is particularly interesting, and we're going to come back to the interactions that we have with the natural world and the way that those places that people go to seek solace and relief from perhaps environmental concerns and other concerns in their lives can also be a reminder of what we might lose as well. So these three examples, I think, give us a pretty good overview of the variety of ways in which eco-anxiety can be felt. But of course, there are many more there. And one of the things that I'd like to point out is that this research is very much from a kind of a Western-centric position. And of course, the very real feelings of anxiety and worry that come from being on the front line of climate change are also wrapped up here. And there's a lot of anxiety and concern related to much of the global south that are currently experiencing some of the worst impacts of climate change. But eco-anxiety is not the only term here, and we've already mentioned climate anxiety, but there's lots and lots of other terms, and this is from a particular systematic review of the literature, quite a recent review, which looked through and seen that across a lot of research there are different terms that are used for different reasons. So everything from shame and fear and trauma and despair and grief and dread through to things like solastalgia, which is a sort of a form of nostalgia for something that we for places that we go to seek solace and relief, and so that links into the previous point about environments. But we can see that things like guilt play a large part here as well, and for some people anxiety doesn't go far enough, and in fact we should be calling it anger or angst, because it can be linked to a feeling of powerlessness as well. But it is important to bring this back into context in that some of those definitions, like solastalgia, are related to people's position in terms of the environment and the local place in which they find themselves. However, eco-anxiety has a much broader concern. It's broader than a place-based distress for change that we might see in our local areas, although that might feed into it. And even it might even be broader than climate anxiety, because it relates to an anxiety about the broader ecological crisis. And as I've already said, this is, and it's been mentioned again in the same systematic review, which is linked to here, and there's a link at the end of this presentation, which you can go and have a look at this. But one of the massive gaps at the moment in terms of research is how eco-anxiety relates to indigenous populations and those not from Western countries, which is where the majority of the research currently has been done. And we can see as well related to that feelings of anxiety are likely to be more prevalent amongst indigenous communities who are not only more geographically vulnerable, but also more dependent on those resources and natural environments and practices which are very much at risk in a changing climate. There's also no diagnosis as such of eco-anxiety, and I think this is an important point because people are very quick to medicalize eco-anxiety as a problem. Oh, I'm suffering with eco-anxiety, and many people are, and I count myself as one of those people that struggles to sleep at night because of the woes of those of the kind of the burden of the responsibility of what it means to live at a time of climate change and climate upheaval. But this is not a medically defined issue, although it might relate to other forms of anxiety. So we can see that people that have a predisposition to other forms of anxiety are more likely to report that they are suffering from eco-anxiety. So there may be a link there, but as of yet, it's not been defined medically. But as Caroline Hickman is saying here, it can be a very useful frame for thinking about our responsibility and our concern on a collective, social, and global level. It can be a gateway for thinking about our responses to very complex issues and different crises all at once, and using a term which can collectivize us and bring us together under a common cause. And Holly-Ann Passmore here as well talks about the way in which perhaps we should move away from eco-anxiety necessarily as being bad, and therefore perhaps we should not be medicalizing or seeking to medicalize this, but instead thinking about it as being an indication of a caring relationship with the beyond the human or more than human world, and the way in which that's changing. So it's a form of empathy, it's a form of heightened sensitivity to the state of the world and the way in which we should be acting very quickly to care for it and to ensure that a greater unraveling of those natural systems doesn't occur. We can see, though, from the literature that there are a number of various predicting factors. So we can see that those people with direct experiences of climate disasters have experienced and have reported greater feelings of eco-anxiety, but also indirect experiences can lead to feelings of anxiety. So Saffron O'Neill and Lorraine Whitmarsh have both looked at ways in which the media, and particularly images, but also other ways of conveying the climate and ecological emergency can lead to anxiety. And something that's particularly interesting is how you frame the climate emergency and how you can kind of through image and through visuals convey something which is both at the same time kind of worrying and alarming, but also galvanizing for taking action. And I've already mentioned about the fact that general anxiety can lead to a disposition for eco-anxiety. The relationship between nature connectedness and eco-anxiety is more complicated, and we'll come back to that. People are reporting feeling the sense of powerlessness, and some of Caroline Hickman's research looked at young people, and not very much research has looked at young people, but this particular piece looked at how people felt the crisis was being taken care of, and over 70% of the young people that they spoke to in this research reported that they didn't trust their governments to take action. And we don't yet know, there's not enough evidence to know whether gender, location, and class are predeterminate of for eco-anxiety. It's quite likely that they will be, but there's other research which is needed to be done in that area. Lots of other things here. Obviously, we've talked young people and people with pre-existing disorders. We've talked briefly about indigenous peoples, but also those people, other people that rely on the natural world directly for livelihoods, and can see that it's in flux and changing. Related to that, people who exercise in nature, or people whose beliefs are rooted in nature. People who are involved in research into the natural world, or in campaigning on climate and ecological issues, and people with stronger environmental values, all of which are seen to be more anxious. So how do we cope with this? Well, there's a useful framework here, I think, for considering the ways in which we might go about coping with that. And it's quite easy, I think, to consider this first option. So the first option here, which is the emotion-focused coping. So if we think about perhaps a child or a young person saying that they're worried about the state of the world, we might first go to the option of saying, well, don't worry about it. Try to rationalize it, and thinking about reducing those emotional responses, and trying to get them to a place where actually they can see that it's not really that much of a big issue to them. So taking that concern and kind of almost nullifying it. Or we could say, well, okay, there's this problem that's making us feel this way. So what's the root cause of it? Can we be practical about this and go to the root cause and target that cause practically? And that might mean working in communities, in groups, in families, and thinking, well, what practical steps can we do something about it? There's something which is making us feel worried, so let's do something about it. And then the final one is about trying to make meaning of the greater than self situation. So thinking about the role of governments, thinking about the role of civil society, thinking about the role of organizations, and developing trust in others to act. And that might be trust on a community level, but it might also be trust on a kind of wider governance level. And the important thing to note here is that we could see from the research that both of these two ways of coping with eco-anxiety are linked to the development of pro-environmental or environmental caring behaviours, and really, I think those are the things that we need to be cultivating in people. So we should be targeting our response not just to the emotional fallout of this, but instead to thinking about what are the root causes and the drivers behind this. So going back and just drawing a line under this point, really, it's a problem for mental health, yes, but it's also a rational response to a broad overarching crisis which can motivate pro-environmental behaviors. So we need to hold those two things in our mind at once. This is a problem, and this is a challenge for society, and it's a challenge for global health, but it's also an indication of the way in which we empathize and care for the state of the world and for each other. We know that nature connectedness is very good for people's mental health and well-being, and we also know that nature connectedness can be a driver for pro-environmental behaviors, and we've seen that in quite recent research. It can help to reduce stress and worry. It can give us new relationships with the world around us. It can help give us strategies to take action in the world. So my slide's not changed. So I should have said mindfulness is our way of Let me just go back. Let's start that again. So nature connectedness is a way in which we can obviously reduce our stress and our worry about the situation that we find ourselves in. But as well as that, nature connectedness is seen as a precursor for pro-environmental behaviours, and we've seen that in recent research which has been conducted. The problem with nature connectedness, and we're seeing this with eco-anxiety, is it is also promoting and encouraging people to recognise the threat posed to the environment. And so we can say to people, well, eco-anxiety, a great way is to get out into nature and to enjoy natural environments. But also, this is a way in which people are kind of reminded of problems. And so it might be one of the ways out from this could be that, well, yes, going to nature is one good thing we could be doing, but also ways to take action for the natural world are particularly important, because we know that pro-environmental behaviours and taking action in appropriate ways can reduce eco-anxiety. So going on to mindfulness, which is, I've already covered it, but without the slide showing, this is a way that we can kind of almost step back from our worries and to reduce stress and worry by taking a more objective view of what's going on, but also reframing our relationship with anxiety and not to avoid it, but to see it afresh. But it can also help us to move towards that meaning-focused engagement strategy we mentioned earlier. So to think about the role of leadership, to think about the root causes of the issues, and not just to dwell on the emotional outcomes. We can work with others, we can take action alongside others, we can join groups. All of these things have been seen to be effective at reducing feelings of anxiety by giving people opportunities to take action on the things they care about. Creative expression, connecting with each other through art and through literature, and sharing with others through conversation, also really important. And then finally, going back again to Caroline Hickman, we wouldn't feel these responses if we didn't care. And so thinking about reframing this into something which is more akin to empathy or compassion or caring behaviours, and seeing ourselves as in empathy with the planet, is a new way for us to perhaps get to grips with how eco-anxiety can help us to take action for the things we care about. And so how might we do that? Well, we could think about eco-anxiety either in terms of perhaps eco-paralysis, where we're unable to act, where perhaps we get feelings of apathy, or we can help to support people move into what we might call eco-action. So on the one hand, we've got maybe feelings of nihilistic hopelessness, maybe despair. On the other hand, we've got perhaps cautiously optimistic ways in which we might be able to take action within our communities and with each other. But it's important to remember that we don't have any kind of history that we can call on at this time to remember how we have done this in the past, and this is all new to us. And so it's important that we get the ingredients right for moving into eco-action. And here, kind of simply laid out, are three of the possible ingredients which I'm proposing that we perhaps think about throughout this project. One of them is very much about the self, so the possibility of acting. So the possibility of acting is the agency that individuals have within the world. And although that is about the self, it's also to do with the structures and the privileges that we have. So agency isn't distributed evenly, depending on where we live, depending on who we are, depending on our age and our gender and so on, race and class and all the rest of it. We're experiencing a variety of different forms of agency. So the possibility of acting is one thing, but it's not enough alone. And we need to have a sense of justice at the heart of any action that we take on eco-anxiety, and support that we might give to people to action in the world. So although this project's called Art and Agency, it's not enough alone just to think about agency. So we could perhaps also think about the sense of feeling that we can act, and this is what's known as efficacy. So we might think, well, we've got agency, but how supported do we feel? How likely is it that when we act that it's going to make any kind of difference? If we do act, will our peers act? Will our groups and our families and our communities act alongside us? So we've got individual efficacy and group efficacy, which can relate to agency. But also, we're not alone in this, in that we have leadership within society, for better or worse, and some leaders obviously taking more action than others, but trusting in others that they will act, trusting in leaders that they will act, is also important. So we might see leadership in the form of group leadership in our communities. We might see that at a larger scale in terms of governments or local authorities as well. So leadership, feelings of efficacy and agency all interact to create the potential for action. It's important for us to get the right balance between giving people a lot to worry about and perhaps not enough to worry about, and then to think about the ways in which that concern can be a gateway for action in the world. And we shouldn't be seeking to diminish any concern, but we should also be providing people with opportunities, perhaps to do something about that. And so we can perhaps motivate action through concern. We might be able to see more pro-environmental behaviours linked to eco-anxiety. We can also see that taking action is really, really good for people's anxiety. But we don't know yet, and the research doesn't give us any kind of clear indication of where that threshold is. And so it's important that when we're doing this and we're going and working with individuals and with groups, that for different people, this might be a different point. Some people might be able to cope with a lot of information about the state of the world before moving into despondency and despair. Other people might need to be given lots of opportunities to take action. And I think that's something that we really need more work on, and we have to be very careful about not switching people off and moving people into apathy, and instead encouraging that sense of empathy and care. And so in summary, there is, slides aren't moving on. There is a huge set of implications for the in terms of mental health fallout from the climate and ecological emergency that we should not be shying away from. It's a rapidly evolving concept that's not yet been medicalized, and perhaps it shouldn't be medicalized, because it's neither good nor bad, and the literature is demonstrating that yes, there's feelings, there's serious issues around anxiety and mental health that we should be concerned about, but also it is a way for us to take action. And we need this balance between efficacy, agency, and leadership in order for that to take place, and that might look different in different locations. We can also see massive gaps in terms of the literature that I've spoken about in this presentation is very Western centric, and there's been very little work done with Indigenous communities, with the Global South, and understanding the perspectives of people that have been on the front line of climate change for generations, and are, or at least for decades, and are experiencing the effect of a changing climate much more rapidly today. And so we need a lot more research in that area as well. But for now, that gives us a glimpse in what's become a very rapidly evolving and very fast-moving area of research. So I will stop there.
Lewis, that was really fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing all of that work that you've done. I really hope that the people who've been watching this will have some thoughts and some questions and something to add to this journey. So I'm just sending you a reminder https://burythegiant.club. So please join us on this journey and add what you'd like to and help us understand better. Thank you very much, Lewis.
Thank you.